All right. We're in such a time of upheaval in our country. We need change all over the place. There was a moment in our country when George Floyd was allegedly killed by a police officer that pretty much everyone in the country was in agreement. Hey, man, you know what? This stuff's got to stop. And we had our moment there where we really could have united our country, and we needed that moment. But that's when George Soros and Antifa and Black Lives Matter and this same group of Marxists who've been trying to chip away at our country in all these blue states, that's where they came in. They don't want to see uniting. They want to see dividing by race. And that's why we're seeing all this crap out there. And a guy who knows how to turn a movement into a phenomenon joins me right now. Michael Johns is with me. He's one of the co-founders of the Tea Party movement. He's a policy analyst, writer, former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush. And Mike, I don't believe any of these polls, the fundraising numbers, they're, to me, hit or miss. But what are you seeing going on right now with, under 50 days to election?
Well, I think you're right about the polls. I think, basically you see these things trending in the same direction as they did in 16, which is to say that the mainstream media polls are almost certainly off. Rasmussen was the most reliable in 16. You might recall they had Hillary Clinton up like 1.1% over Trump heading into that election. And they right now have Trump leading by a point. Also encouraging as it relates to Rasmussen, which I have come to really view as one of the most reliable polling firms out there, is that they see African Americans turning on the street violence. There is no basis to believe that BLM is speaking for African Americans. Their latest poll shows 59% of the country supporting Blue Lives Matter laws, which is important. 68% concerned that violence is leading to law enforcement shortage. But when that question is presented to African Americans, it goes up to 84%. So you have 84% of African Americans who believe that the street violence is literally endangering to their respective neighborhoods, particularly as it relates to discouraging the presence of law enforcement. And I think this really is an opening window for President Trump to articulate this message around the country. I think it's a winning one. So on both the issues that we confront, present moment, JT, I see, coronavirus pandemic. I mean, this is an outrageous comment that Biden made last night on the CNN town hall, saying that, essentially that if the president had done his job from the beginning, all the people would still be alive. This from the guy who opposed, as we've talked about repeatedly, this travel ban on January 31, which was the singular most important critical decision that would have been made. In fact, it's Biden's whose loss of life, I think, had he been in the Oval Office, would have been increased. So on both these issues, I don't sense much strength. On the other hand, as you correctly say, leading into this, we've got everyone in the country feeling plenty anxious about the state of things.
Yeah, Mike, hey, let's take a look at exactly how Joe Biden put it, because there's no two ways about it. He said, in absolute terms, if he was president, all the people that are dead would be alive. Here's Joe Biden from the town hall.
The president had done his job from the beginning. All the people would still be alive. All the people, I'm not making this up, just look at the data. Look at the data. And then we're now being told there's going to be I pray to God there's a vaccine tomorrow that could be available to everyone. First of all, once a vaccine is made available, and you know this well, once it's made available, it's going.
It's crazy that there's no fact checking. Donald Trump's taking a beating on, with George Stephanopoulos, one of the henchmen in the Clinton cartel, on his ABC town hall. And Anderson Cooper doesn't even follow up and say, well, hey, sir, just let me ask you, do you really think no one would have died if you were president? Well, why do they just keep pampering this guy, Mike?
Because they're biased and they want him to win, I guess is the most obvious answer. I mean, really, it is that straight up. I mean, this is a question I think a lot of us in the conservative movement have pondered our whole adult lives, is why is there not at least some aberration, some person who would stand up in one of these outlets at CNN and say, let's actually be journalists, let's actually be down the line neutral and ask the tough questions. Sadly, you're exactly right. That was a disgraceful performance last night by Anderson Cooper. And he has been called out, which is some good news. The Washington Post was critical of him. A bunch of other media outlets were like, this was absurd. I mean, it really was an absolute waste of airtime. And most importantly, deceiving in the sense that it was presented as Biden confronting the tough questions. And then they stacked, and by the way, another Scranton audience. Can we get it straight? This guy left Scranton 70 years ago. All right. This idea that Joe from Scranton is just another one of us is completely wrong. This man has spent his entire adult life in the swamp, enriching his family. New information now coming out about the magnitude of the business dealings that Hunter Biden has had with Communist China, all concerning from the standpoint, not just the political conflict, but I think legal issues potentially as well. So you're exactly right. We're at this critical juncture where we have a president who, leading up to this pandemic, had done really an extraordinary job. Over 7 million jobs created, hitting 3% GDP in a bunch of these quarters, lowest unemployment in 50 years. All the signs of an economy that was humming and a country that finally was getting reestablishing itself in the world after 8 years of Biden and Obama's mismanagement of things. And now's really the opportunity, I think, where the communication over these next few weeks is going to be vital to take back the agenda and to make it clear that we cannot go back to this man who spent 47 years and can't really even name one major accomplishment that he's had down there.
Well, we had the 94 crime bill, Mike, which, disproportionately incarcerated millions of African Americans. And now they brought in, the chief prosecutor of that crime bill, Kamala Harris, who was throwing people in jail for smoking some weed. I don't know if you noticed this weird phenomenon that's happening lately. Both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been, on air many times now saying in a Harris administration with Joe Biden. Do you see any of this stuff? They keep referring to it as a Harris admin.
The guy's unclear what office he's running for. He's unclear, on just about every fundamental fact. In fact, you have incredibly a larger percentage of the American people who view him to be mentally unfit for the office than those who would support him, which does suggest that you got a certain percentage of the American people who acknowledge that he's mentally unfit and are still prepared to vote for him, which is why I think these polls, as we opened up, are very misleading, because the typical American who's going to vote for Trump and supports Trump doesn't like talking to mainstream media outlets, doesn't trust them, and when they do speak with them, probably tell them what they want to hear very often, not what they actually are going to do. I think this president's got an incredible story to tell. I think Biden's got tough questions he's got to answer. I mean, back into the Paris Agreement we go, where China's exempted. Back into this Iran agreement, we're gonna restore trade relationships with this barbaric, threatening regime, the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. $4 trillion in new taxes when we're trying to create jobs. And every analysis that's looked at that suggests it's going to make us less competitive. It's going to stifle job creation, kill off jobs, and negatively affect wages. And then finally, why would we want to put the corporate rate back over China's when this president correctly has brought it down from 35, where Obama and Biden had it, to 21, finally at least making us competitive with major trading partners. You got Biden going to put it back up to 28. Well, money moves around the world, as you know well, and he would just really make this country, again, inhospitable to business, which means inhospitable to jobs and wages.
So the more evidence comes out talking about the immense financial ties between his son and China, probably leads you down the right path to why he wants to raise our tax rate. But in our final minute here, Mike, I just got to ask you this. Do you think they'll actually debate? Do you think Joe Biden will actually show up for a physical debate?
Laura Ingraham, who I've known for 35 years, back to college days, says a 0% chance that Biden's going to participate in these debates. And she's very often right about these things. But I look at it and I say, well, what sort of plausible excuse are you're going to dodge that? And you think the American people are not going to be impacted by that when they head to the voting booths on November 3? I don't see what plausible excuse he's going to have to be able to get out of these, particularly given that even in the worst pandemic conditions, they can be done remotely.
Right.
I mean, how would you? But there's a lot of intelligent people out there who simply believe that his people are convinced that putting him in his current state and with his record and with all of these difficult questions that he's inevitably going to have to confront, hopefully that avoiding it is the best option.
Yeah, that's what I think is going to happen too. All right, you can't avoid Michael Johns because he's here every Friday with us. Brother, thank you so much. We'll check in with you next week. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too, buddy.
Liquid Lunch wraps it up in just 1 minute.